continue. And recording, we should be recording. And I am sharing the screen, and we are looking at what should be Construction 101, week 1 and 2, the construction industry. What is construction management? Earlier in the evening, I went through on the syllabus and really said that this is a kind of a really high level discussion about our introduction to the industry, that we that there's a lot to talk about, and the textbook that we have, Construction Management Jumpstart, is a great textbook to get us introduced. We do chapter by chapter. I don't try to make it too complicated. You've got the resource with you in that textbook. And then what I'm going to do is really kind of just point out and highlight and bring focus to the things that we really need to pay attention to as we are introduced to the industry. I talked a little bit earlier in the syllabus that as in Construction 160, we look at methods of construction, the physical, materials and how they are put together, and talk a little bit about the building science behind them. And so there's some methods and materials involved there. This class is kind of the methods and if you will, materials, probably more methods, but more management methods. What is the methodologies that we go about to, and tools that we use to put together from a leadership and from a management point of view, the construction projects, right? They're very complicated construction projects. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the complexities of a construction project, because once we are able to kind of, decode, if you will, or compartmentalize, or what we say in project management terms, we call it how we break down the work, right? We decompose the work, because there's so much work in a construction project. We want to decompose it. That once you see how you can gain methods of how to go about, let's say, through decomposing a project, you'll take a big sigh of relief and know that, hey, this isn't so bad. In fact, it's really interesting, and it's a skill that not many people have, hence why they hire construction managers. So in this particular presentation tonight, in front of you, and I know it's kind of tiny. I mean, I could bring up the PowerPoint, but there's a reason why I have it set up this way, because I like to move things around. I'm kind of what I call a click and locate, right? You can kind of move these things around. And so you can see here, the first thing I want to kind of share with everybody is that in the construction management realm, if you will, there are a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of experts, call them professionals, call them people, but they do have titles, but even the titles then are somewhat generic. So as we look at the roles and responsibilities, even the roles and responsibilities have to be broken down, right? Everything has to have some decomposition to it, or it's just going to be really too general and too broad to really understand how everything kind of interconnects and combines with each other. So if you've had the chance, hopefully you will now, because you know how to get in LinkedIn Learning. Do watch the videos from week 1 and week 2. They're good introductory videos. A lot of what I share tonight should align. The speaker in the LinkedIn videos may share them in a different way, and obviously they're much more professionally crafted and it looks really cool, and the speaker does a nice job and probably a great production behind it. And here you're getting, a slide, not even a slideshow presentation. You're getting more like me, clicking and moving things around. But that's besides the point, right? We're here to kind of get an idea of how we can view the construction management. In this particular case tonight, I'm talking about roles and responsibilities and all of kind of the general players, and then speak to what we call certain project delivery models. But right away, what you can see on the screen is a number of names, right? Builder, which is the role that takes the parts and the pieces and actually builds the structure, if you will. Subcontractors, a lot of these are going to be familiar to you. I put in a plumbing sub. The architect has a role. What's that role? Some of you who've gotten a head start in the reading have read about the architect's role or have a familiarity because in your life experiences have worked with architects or have hired an architect for various reasons. There are engineers, and then I put the term structural. How does that, how does that work out? And then I have the word here, civil. So I've got a number of terms here, pretty straightforward terms, but the idea is this, is that how would I go about maybe perhaps creating relationships here between these if you will, players within the industry. Certainly you're going to find through your readings and through your watching of the videos that the person at the top of a project organization is going to be the owner, right? That's going to be your client. That's going to be the person who's asked you or hired you to build the building, hired an architect, hired a contractor. And so as I speak to the architect, right, as I speak to the builder who is the contractor, I'm kind of moving these parts and pieces around and trying to get these organized in a way that kind of breaks down the organization, kind of breaks down how you would see a construction project being organized. Well, certainly at the top of this org chart is going to be your owner because, well, they're paying the bills and they're hiring, they're funding the project. They're the ones that have a need for this building, for this structure. Now they'll hire the architect. Who out there real quick can tell me the role of the architect?
To draw out the designs of the house or structure.
That's right. The architect provides the element of design, right? Design is a term used that is, a creative component, right? That there are ways to go about solving a problem, and you can do that through various designs. Design is different from planning. So there's two terms I want you to kind of understand when it relates to the architect. The architect does both. But when you say the architect plans, the architect will plan a design, right? Those are two separate things, mean two separate things. But by and large, the architect is that the management component that involves design. And so when we look at our little org chart here, let's see if I can create a line here. I think that should give me a line, create a line there. Yeah. There's a line. And so, so there's a relationship here between the owner and the architect, and that line there, that relationship, let's see if I can make it a little bit bolder so you guys can see it. That relationship there between the owner and the architect is a design relationship. So if I come here and I make a text box, something like this, I don't know if it's not going to cut it out here. Come on, text box. There we go. Right? Design line. Come on, line. There we go. The design element between the owner and the architect is one where the architect takes the idea from the owner as to the type of building that they need. So let's put this in context. Let's put it as an example. Let's say it's an elementary school. So the owner could be a school district, and the school district goes out and they solicit, or they go out and they hire an architect to help them design an elementary school. And we're all familiar with elementary schools, right? They have a gymnasium, and they have maybe the classrooms for the fourth, fifth, and sixth graders, and then they have the classrooms for the first, second, third graders, and there's usually playgrounds and all those kind of amenities that are part of the construction of a campus for an elementary school. The architect will be hired to design that in the case of putting together plans and specifications. Now, you've got that element, the plans and specifications are put together, but now it has to be built, right? And that's where the builder comes in. So here, if I'm gonna make a line here, come on, let's go. There we go. Align it with the builder, and we'll thicken that up a little bit here. Oh, it's really thick. Let's go a little bit thinner on that. So the builder, well, what's the builder's role? Well, welcome to the construction management program, right? That's kind of where we're at. That's our involvement. The builder, I use the term builder because we're actually, building, but in the sense we're managing, as I had mentioned earlier, the methods of management of the process of how we go about building. And so the builder constructs the building. So if I were going to, put a text box here and type in construct, the builder will construct the building. And there's a lot involved with the idea of construct, right? It may, depending on when the builder gets involved with the owner will hire the builder. The builder will utilize the plans and specifications that have been provided by the architect, right? So if I draw a line here, there's a relationship between the architect and the builder in that the architect provides the plans and the specifications. The builder will receive those plans and specifications and build off of those. So if you've got kids, or if you've ever been part of building Legos, you open up the box, there's always going to be instructions on how to take all of those cubes, which are massed in a bunch of bags that you kind of, lay out on the floor, but then you've got the instructions to be able to put them all together. Well, the architect creates those instructions. That's your plans and specs. The builder will take those instructions. The builder will open up the bags, get all the Lego pieces kind of organized and put together in terms of where they need to go, and then follow the plans and specs and actually start to put it together. That's the builder. Now, the idea between the owner, the architect, and the builder as a collaborative group is thinking about the different ways that we go about and do project delivery. And we'll talk about that here shortly, the different types. But this is typical. This is typical where you're going to have the architect in charge in managing the design component, and you're going to have the builder or general contractor or construction manager. There are a number of terms that will represent the builder. They will be in charge of looking at the plans and specs, identifying the resources needed to build that project, manage those resources to build that project for the owner. So the owner then gets the building that they need. And in our little example with the school district, right, the builder would get the elementary school plan drawings built by the architect and build that building for the school district. And certainly there's a lot loaded in that with the builder, but we won't get into that now, right? We're talking about cost, we talk about schedule, we talk about quality of work, talk about scope of work. Many things are involved with the construction management methods with the builder. And that's predominantly what we're going to be talking about in what we look at in terms of our development as construction managers, is that we're going to be highly focused on that builder side, but we need to understand the rest of the parties, the rest of the roles and responsibilities in the project. So let's look at some of these other boxes that I've put together. And some of you intuitively probably can see what we need to do with them and where they more than likely will go. The architect, because they're more relevant to design, are going to be working with experts, because the architects aren't experts in a lot of the engineering pieces that are involved with the design of a building. For example, the structural component, right? As we talked about, I think in the Construction 160 class, we deal with a lot of different materials, wood, concrete, steel. These are all really big parts and pieces that make up the structure of a building. Well, the architect will design a building, but the structural piece, the architect will delegate and or hire, in some instances, a structural engineer. So the architect manages the structural engineering piece because, again, the structural engineer is going to have to draw drawings to supplement the plans and the specifications that the architect puts together. So there's a structural piece that the architect will manage. So if I here am drawing my line of a relationship here, I would draw a line here between the architect and the structural engineer. Now, in general, there are a number of engineers. I mentioned structural because it's a fairly large piece and an important piece. And we actually have a class that will specifically study as it relates to structures. And so that's why I kind of wanted to highlight the structural engineering piece. but we also have other engineering components that are part of the program. One is, I hit it here, the civil engineer, right? Civil engineering has to do with the site work and the utilities and the groundwork and things that kind of are at the base of a building related to earthwork. And so the civil piece is fairly broad. It might involve traffic, it might involve street work. And like I said, the utilities would come in. It may involve preparing the site with the appropriate soils materials that maybe the site as it's being built may not have that appropriate soils materials. So there's a civil component that relates to site work. And so that would be another engineer that the architect would hire, and that would be underneath the architect. And then in the end, there are also some additional engineers that might be relevant to a project: electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, plumbing engineering, anything that's kind of as opposed to electrical, the mechanical, right? Plumbing, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, that's all engineered. All of these kind of specialty engineering pieces on most projects are going to be managed by the architect. And that's not saying all projects, but on most projects are going to be managed by the architect. So there's a number of engineers that are involved in the project. That, again, as you look at the depiction of the picture, is the design side. Now, when we look at the construct side, these terms now are probably becoming familiar, especially those who are in the industry. Now, I lined up, my org chart here. As you can see underneath the builder, we've got subcontractors. I'll go ahead and line in that relationship there. I don't know if I have enough space here. Let me bring this down a little bit. So I'll go ahead and line up that relationship there. Subcontractors, and of the subcontractors, when we speak about subcontracting, when we think of the builder, when we think of the general contractor, they don't know everything. They may self-perform, let's say, concrete slab work, or they may self-perform wood framing. Self-perform is the builder in and of itself. The contractor is able to provide those trade skills, those services. That's called self-performance, because the builder, it's part of their business. But most often the builder is not expert at everything. They may be expert at wood framing, and so they'll build it, but they're not going to be expert at plumbing. They're not going to be expert at electrical. They won't be expert at HVAC, drywall, painting, tile floors, you name it. There's going to be a lot of things that the builder or the general contractor will not be expert at. As a result, they need to hire out, or they need to subcontract out to those experts. And so in this particular example, I've got subcontractors who could be a number of what I just mentioned. And then below the subcontractors, I have an example, which is the plumbing sub. I'll go ahead and draw a quick line to the plumbing sub there. But you can see I don't really have a great deal of space to be able to create my full chart. But I want you to kind of think, if you were able to continue with this chart, that you would be able to, identify the additional disciplines that would be listed underneath the subcontractors alongside the plumbing sub. Like I said, electrical, HVAC, painting, drywall. You may have a civil engineer put together plans for the architect as it relates to the utilities for a particular project. Well, the architect's not going to hire the contractor that's going to do that work. The builder will hire a subcontractor that specializes in utility work. And so that utility sub would be placed next side to the plumbing sub down here as part of doing the civil engineering work. And so the idea here with this org chart is to be able to start to see the relationship of how the three main parties that we typically are talking about in construction management, the owner, the architect, and the builder, how they will relate to each other, and how really on the design side, the architect is managing that piece, that component, and how on the construct side or the build side, you've got the general contractor or the construction manager. And that's the side that we're learning from. That's the side that we kind of have our point of view and our perspective as we look at the process. So what I want to do now is that now that we have that kind of backdrop, that idea, I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this slide, if you look at it, has our, main players of the process here, the construction management process. the owner who desires the building, the architect, which is the design element, and the builder or the construct side of it, right? The entity, the construction entity, the construction management entity that's going to actually physically manage the construction of the building. And now below here, I'll see if I can get it a little bit closer. If not, I'll have to pan back again. Let's try 200% is probably going to be pretty close, but I wanted you to see this piece here. If everyone can see that, you can see from left to right, you see design, you see an introduction of a new term that I haven't really talked about to a great extent. I might have mentioned it in a word or two earlier, bid, and then build, right? From left to right, when you look at this, right? When you look at this from left to right, design, bid, build is in general a life cycle where the owner, in that design bar, the owner hires the architect and the architect designs the building. So in this case, the owner hires, in this case, the owner is the school district. They hire an architect who specializes in elementary schools, and they design that little elementary school campus. That becomes the plans and the specs. Now, our time frame, our life, if you will, our time frame going left to right, we get to the spot where it says bid. Well, the bid piece is a number of builders or general contractors will bid the project. So they'll get the plans and specs from the architect, and they will, in this phase, take those plans and they'll bid the plans. Bidding is they will put a cost to how much money it will require to build the elementary school. So everyone puts together what we call a competitive bid. Of those contractors, the architect will work with the owner and they will make a selection. Most often will select the lowest bidder, the lowest cost bidder. And then that bidder is the builder then that is hired on contract to then build the project, which you can see the frame here. The build part is now that we've awarded the contract to the builder or the general contractor, they will now build the project to the finish. So from left to right, very linear, right? Design, architect designs the building for the school district in the elementary school. Those are complete in full. And then they go to a bidding process with looking to hire a builder. The builder with the lowest cost usually is awarded the contract. After they are awarded the contract, they begin to build the project and then they finish the project, okay? So that is called design, bid, build. And so I'm gonna take my view and pull it back and so we can look at that and reflect on it again. Basic relationship, owner, architect, builder. The two lines separate a contract with the architect. The owner has a contract with the architect. The owner will have a contract with the builder. Now that's a predominantly very historical, very traditional way of delivering construction projects. And most of you are probably familiar with that from your life experiences. So now here's another one. And notice the difference. Here's owner, architect, builder, conventional design, bid, build. You see the schedule down below in bar chart form. Now we see the addition of a construction manager. So you might be scratching your head a little bit saying, what's Jeff doing here? I thought the builder was the construction manager. Well, you would be right. The builder, the general contractor, still is a construction manager. Still, from this graphic, you can see that we have a linear design, bid, build component to it, but we've added a construction manager. Well, what is that little construction manager box up to the right? That box is that the school district, in our elementary school example, the school district has hired an outside third-party vendor whose job is to help the owner manage the construction project. So the owner hires somebody outside of their school district because they don't have anybody in the school district who is expert in understanding the construction process. They hire an agent, like a professional athlete would hire an agent to represent them in negotiations of their professional contracts. The owner, the school district, would hire an agent, a construction management agent, to represent their interests in the hiring of the builder or in the hiring of the architect, right? So that component is just called agency, right? So construction management agent. The only difference is you can see here the timeline down below here is the design, bid, build hasn't changed. You just have another resource or player that's been added to the process that now represents the owner. So the owner will hire that construction manager to represent their interests, and they'll work with the architect and the builder through the process. Most often that construction manager's role, and I got it down here, will be in the design element right below our design bid build to the finish. That construction manager will be heavily involved with the design element representing the owner, or in this case, the school district's interest, as they prepare the paperwork for the bidding process. The construction manager will be involved certainly with the bidding and the build process, but more lightly than early on when they can really add value at the very beginning in representing the owner's interests. Okay, so that's called the construction manager as an agent, as agency. And all of these are discussed in the textbook, so you can always go back to the textbook and read about them as well. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to pause, take a break. Let's take 10 minutes, come back at 7:20, and we'll continue to talk about the delivery models, and then we'll call it an evening. All right. So 10 minutes. I'll see you at 7:20.
Okay.